You gotta be kidding me. Nope, that's there. I'm seeing it. Ah, man.
Doing the same thing over and over again with the expectation of a different result is the definition of insanity, and so true is Deathloop. The newest game from esteemed developers at Arcane Studios have made a video game that captures the very essence of insanity while wrapping it up in an addictive first-person shooter format. Borrowing heavily from the studio's Dishonored games, Deathloop feels like a natural extension of those titles, both mechanically and graphically. Deathloop's attempt at merging time-looping elements into a narrative-focused first-person shooter is largely a great success, as all of its parts expertly come together to make Deathloop one of this year's most surprising and unpredictable hits.
Black Reef. Must be the low season.
Deathloop begins rather abruptly and puts you right into the game as you emerge from a bizarre nightmare and wake up on a sandy beach as protagonist Colt Vaughn. Rather hungover with no recollection of why he is coming to his senses on a mysterious beach, the game begins with Colt trying to find any clues as to why he is there. He eventually encounters Juliana Blake, the game's primary antagonist, who promptly kills Colt. But something strange happens. Colt wakes up on the very same beach again, knowing full well that he was killed by a woman named Juliana, and discovers that no matter how many times he dies or has killed the island's inhabitants, Colt, along with his enemies, will always come back to life the very next morning on that very same beach. Armed with the ability to remember everything that happens with each cycle of life, Colt embarks on a quest full of mystery to try to break free of this crazy loop. In the earlier moments of the game, Colt realizes he is on an island called Black Reef, a frigid and hostile island that is dotted with military bunkers and cities that host inhabitants that are all too happy to take your life. Life on Black Reef is like a never-ending party, as people live solely to indulge and do what they want to do, knowing full well that their day will reset every midnight. Death is no mere consequence for Black Reef's inhabitants, known as Eternalists, as they will do anything in their power to mow you down, day after day. Colt has a long way to uncover the truth behind his mysterious past as you guide him along, day after day, uncovering audio logs, data entries, and coming across other versions of himself to try to put the pieces together. Colt is a tremendously likable and well-acted character whose banter with himself, and especially with Juliana, creates some of the most hilarious and memorable moments of the game.
Colt, you're never, ever going to break the loop. It's absolutely impossible.
You want me to break it? You don't want me to break it. What do you want from me?
I want you to not suck.
Okay, it's been a pretty shitty morning. Or two, so I'm done.
To complicate matters, there are 8 people on the island, known as Visionaries, and they are responsible to keeping the loop alive. Even if one Visionary dies, the loop remains intact. Therefore, the answer to ending the loop on Black Reef is to kill all 8 Visionaries in one day, before the clock strikes midnight. Each of these Visionaries has their own backstory, agenda, personality, and special powers to try to stop Colt in his tracks. For example, the Visionary Dr. Wenji has the power to clone himself into an army of replicas as to confute Colt and make it difficult to find the true Dr. Wenji. Visionary Charlie Montague is a game designer, and his base of operations is a sprawling, multi-leveled building akin to a themed laser tag arena, who can warp around the battlefield, making tracking him down amidst all the henchmen to be a disorienting and frantic chore. Each Visionary presents itself as a thrilling and unique boss encounter, where fighting them is just one part of the battle. Finding each Visionary is also a piece of the puzzle, as each Visionary operates on his or her own schedule, meaning Colt must take into consideration the time of day and other events that Colt can initiate to reveal the location of Visionaries. These Visionaries are presented as the game's boss fights, meaning they all have a bit more HP than their Eternalist counterparts, and often have unique abilities to disorient or make things difficult for Colt to bring down. In addition, numerous Visionaries use their own unique guns that offer their own bonuses and stat attributes when acquired. The one advantage that Colt has over the 8 Visionaries is that Colt retains his memories through each loop, whereas the Visionaries and Eternalists do not. Meaning that once Colt figures out what a particular Visionary schedule is, he will know exactly where, how, and when to hunt down that Visionary. To complicate matters, Juliana, the game's primary antagonist, has the same powers as Colt, meaning she can also extend her memories between loops on Blackreef. Juliana is a ferocious woman, and while not giving away any spoilers to the story, is relentless and will hunt Colt down during his time on Blackreef, seemingly at random as well. The dialogue the two share together is some of the most entertaining dialogue in the game, and is as witty and clever with their banter as their strange and mysterious relationship that becomes developed the further into the story you progress. Speaking of progression, the game is broken up into 4 distinct areas that are quite unique from one another and have their own distinct threats and mysteries about them. Take for instance the game's capital city, Updam, which is bustling with Eternalist activity as the neon lights and constant chatter among the city's intercoms creeps into your head and tries to disorient you with its urban streets and alleyways. Contrast this to the more scenic Fristad Rock, where its hills and shorelines lead to some of the game's most interesting secrets. Now, many players may think that just 4 playable areas aren't much to work with, and they're absolutely right to have that takeaway. But what Deathloop does with them is truly special and greatly varies each area when you choose to return to them. See, the game is also further divided into the time of day. There are 4 time periods to be exact, being the morning, noon, afternoon, and evening. Colt has the option to return to each of these locations throughout the 4 time periods in the day, greatly changing up the flow of each of the 4 maps. For example, Fristad Rock, while nice and sunny and relatively relaxed with Eternalist activity in the morning, becomes a totally different scenario in the afternoon, where snow buildup may prevent access to previously accessible areas and increased Eternalist activity in the afternoon. The capital city of Updam, already teeming with activity during the daytime, becomes a totally different scene at nighttime, with thumping bass of parties bouncing off the city streets, fireworks lighting up the night sky, and an even greater presence of Eternalist activity. Each of the 4 districts within Blackreef, in addition to each of the day's effects on these districts, makes each location different enough during each time of day to create a highly unique and entertaining game flow. Colt's actions in one area during the morning may set in motion a chain reaction of events that may completely alter the events that may play out later in the day in the same or different location. Each map is just the right size, with some maps being quite small in area, but more than make up with it in its verticality, like Updam, and to some extent Fristad Rock, while other maps can be a bit more spread out, like the bunker-heavy The Complex. The game's story is progressed by tracking and following various leads from the Visionary Leads page in the menu. This menu gives you an overview of all the mysteries you have uncovered regarding exposing the location of where to encounter each of the game's Visionaries and to eventually kill all the Visionaries in Blackreef to call an end to the looping. By highlighting a particular lead, the game will give you objective markers to pinpoint areas of interest to guide you to unearthing the location of each of the Visionaries. Upon completing the Visionary leads by killing every Visionary, the game's final mission will be presented to you, culminating in an epic loop of attempting to kill each Visionary in one day. It is not necessary to try to kill a Visionary each time you go to a location, as more often than not, you'll find it more beneficial to explore each area and track the various weapon leads to experiment with weapons that could help you round out your arsenal. There is no time limit, nor is there a rush to complete things fast, so take your time and soak up everything the game has to offer. It's often more beneficial to fully explore an area before going into a Visionary lead, as much of that exploration can provide you with excellent new equipment and loot. Navigating the game's 4 distinct areas are a joy, with Deathloop's quality combat and exploration mechanics. If you have ever played the Dishonored series or Prey before, then you will feel right at home with the mechanics on offer in Deathloop. Colt has the ability to peek out of cover, assassinate his enemies from behind with either blunt force or with a knife, and can even take out enemies below by perching atop a ledge and violently colliding with a foe below you. Along with these methods of taking down targets, Colt has a decent arsenal of guns he can find in the game world, including pistols, machine guns, shotguns, rifles, and more. Colt also has a hacking tool that he can use to hack various turrets, alarms, cameras, and other electronic equipment to make a once hostile piece of equipment one that can work for you. It is highly advantageous to hack every hackable piece of equipment you come across to make your time exploring Black Reef much less of a chore. You will often be presented with many enemies surrounding a turret, and it is an easy way to eliminate your targets, to get close to that turret and hack it, and let your turret do the talking to your enemies. This is one of the many ways Colt can progress through an area without his foes being alerted to his presence. You can, however, go in guns blazing, if that is how you'd rather play Deathloop. The beauty of this game is in its variety of options that allows the player the freedom to enact how much carnage they want in any style they want. Near the beginning of the game, Colt earns the ability called Reprise, allowing him to come back to life twice after death. This 3 strikes and you're out system gives players the reassurance that even if you were to make a mistake or fall in battle, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end of the current loop you are playing. In addition, Colt can equip up to 2 different abilities, known as slabs, to use while playing through the specific district he is in. There are 5 unique abilities in the game, with such being the ability to go invisible, to teleport to nearby ledges and surfaces near instantly, and to link together 2 or more enemies, meaning if you kill one, it brings down all the enemies linked together. In order to get these incredible slabs, one must obtain them by taking down visionaries or by killing Juliana. Each of the 8 visionaries is completely unique from one another, often sporting their own artillery with their signature guns and unique slab. As each visionary has a large amount of health and are considerably more deadly than their Eternalist counterparts, they are often considered the bosses of the game, and upon defeating them, rewards the player with some incredible rewards. One such reward is the Slab, which is an ability that Colt can equip once returning into the tunnels from an area. Players who want to feel like an unstoppable demigod should prioritize collecting and infusing as many slabs as possible. More on infusion later. Other rewards by killing visionaries are trinkets, which are equipable upgrades to Colt that enhance different parameters, including his aiming accuracy with guns, health regeneration, making less noise when crouching, to greatly increasing the damage outputs of his abilities and kicks, and so much more. Slabs can be further powered up by collecting multiples of the same slab type, giving you more customization when it comes to how you want your slab abilities to handle. For example, the Aether Slab, which grants Colt invisibility, can be configured to not drain your power meter and allows Colt's stealth assassinations to leave no trace of an enemy, meaning enemies will not be alerted to your presence. These slab modifications are numerous and provide a lot of fun experimentation to hone your playstyle. Like slabs, trinkets can be upgraded in the tunnels upon returning from one of the 4 districts. Like weapons, trinkets can be found in the game world and from looting corpses, and they all come in different rarities. These color-coded rarities offer much more potency and effectiveness in their rarer variations, and it is highly advantageous to keep your eye out for these types of trinkets. Trinkets and slabs can be configured in the menu screen only when you are not in one of the 4 areas, meaning you can only equip and configure your loadout once you have started a new loop or once you have returned from an area into the tunnels. On this screen, the player can fit Colt with a variety of slabs you have found during that particular loop. You may equip Colt with up to 4 trinkets at a time, and up to 2 slabs. Colt can also have up to 3 guns equipped and have a variety of other gadgets and secondary equipment, like his trusty knife, a hacking device, and grenades. Perhaps the most important resource in the game is called Residueum, a resource that is available a few hours into the story. Residueum is a resource that can be found on items in the game world that are radiating a colorful, swelling aura, like a telephone, a box, magazine, etc., as well as from corpses of visionaries. Residueum is a resource that allows the player to essentially hold onto a weapon, a trinket, or slab forever that can be used between every loop, known as a process called infusion. If there's a particular gun you fancy, along with some trinkets and slabs, By spending enough Residuum on them in the menu in between areas, you can use them forever by infusing your gear, giving you a big leg up on your future loops. As such, the earlier portions of the game tend to be the most challenging, since Residuum is unlocked later on, and with it, the peace of mind that knowing that if you were to die, as long as you have your gear infused, you can start another loop with your latest infused gear. Keep in mind that if you were to die in an area before escaping into the safe tunnels, you will lose all of that gear in your inventory that was not infused. You must infuse the gear before the loop ends, so a good rule of thumb is to look at all your loot you managed to obtain after returning from an area and narrow down the gear that you want to keep forever and allocate the Residuum that you have obtained for your desired weapons, slabs, and trinkets. The higher the quality of gear you wish to infuse will incur more Residuum, so keep in mind when deciding which gear you want to keep while running low on Residuum. Also, please keep in mind that you can destroy gear, netting you additional Residuum. Therefore, hoarding as many trinkets and slabs during your playthrough is highly beneficial, as you can sort out the gear you wish to discard and apply the gained Residuum from the sacrificed gear to the gear you wish to keep forever. This gameplay loop of earning Residuum and narrowing down the desired gear to be infused is highly enjoyable during the earlier moments of the game once Residuum is unlocked, because it makes you decide and strategize which gear is truly essential while managing your limited Residuum with just a few pieces of infused gear. The more loops you complete, the more gear you will inevitably have infused, to the point where you basically have every piece of equipment you could ever dream to have at your disposal, with very little incentive to pick up new trinkets, but it takes a while to get to that phase of the game. Unlike many other shooters, Deathloop has no difficulty settings, so you can't play a harder version or an easier version of the game if you wanted to. Every player will have the same challenge upon starting the game, and that may be a turnoff for some players simply interested in not having to put in much of an effort and breeze through the story. However, the game is not terribly difficult to grasp. In fact, I would say that this shooter is a bit easier compared to many other shooters on their default normal difficulty settings, due in large part to being able to carry over your favorite weapons, trinkets, and slabs. The earlier portions of the game can be challenging when experiencing a new area or time of day for the first time, but once the familiarity of the mechanics and layout start to kick in, this game starts to feel much easier. In fact, this game makes you feel inhuman later in the game, with all your infused gear and high-level trinkets equipped. So yes, it can be a little challenging at first, but try to stick with it, because that challenge will dissipate the longer you play. Speaking of challenge, Juliana can and will invade your game as you traverse Black Reef. Juliana is the most unpredictable of the visionaries, as often she comes to take the form of an Eternalist and equip some pretty harsh weaponry, but the benefits of killing her are tremendous. Not only does she drop a hefty amount of Residuum, but she also leaves behind her weapons and whatever slabs she has equipped. So there is a good chance you can pick up 2 slabs off her corpse upon defeating her. Juliana has extended health, and she is quite fast in her movement speed, so once you've gotten the notification that she's invaded, try to stick to an area you have cleared out or are familiar with. Once Juliana invades your game, the routes to the tunnels are blocked off, and you must override the security to grant your passage back to the tunnels when you want to return to the base and regroup. While playing with the online setting enabled, you may have the chance to be invaded by an actual player controlling Juliana. These battles are similar to those of From Software's Souls franchises when you get invaded. Online invasions are a lot more unpredictable, as players may attempt to lure you into enemy-infested areas or other traps. Online invasions may be performed on random players or your own friends who are playing the game. If you want the most stress-free experience when it comes to facing Juliana, you can opt to play in the offline mode. Just keep in mind, Juliana is programmed to invade your game world once per loop, meaning she can invade in one of the 4 times of day per loop. I don't know if that was a glitch or not, but 2 of my loops had Juliana invade me twice. Sometimes Juliana will invade you in the middle of a harrowing gunfight, and even while in combat with another visionary. But make sure to get your distance as best you can. Retreat into a more open area with little to no enemies in the vicinity, and just go commando on Juliana. You will soon begin to enjoy her invasions because when you down her, you'll be soaking up all the loot she was carrying, and she often drops the game's most exotic and desirable loot. Remember to take your time with this game, as there is no rush to simply try to see everything there is to see in the early hours of the game. You will eventually find your stride and have a lot of equipment with you that you will take for the rest of the game and help tackle some of the more obscure secrets in the game. The beauty of Deathloop is that it constantly changes with each district and each time of day, and at first it seems like there's a never-ending list of secrets to be discovered. This feeling of discovery encourages players to continue their engagement with exploring Black Reef, even long after the game's story ends. Upon finishing the game, you can play the loop however long you choose, and you can try to uncover the game's select few endings if you so fancy. Deathloop is excellent at creating emergent gameplay moments that can surprise you, even after sinking dozens of hours into the game. I'm not sure if Deathloop was predicted to have gotten all the attention it did at launch with its high-quality action gameplay, but a few months later from its release, this game is still a banger. Some have questioned if it is similar to roguelike games out there, and I would say that Deathloop is quite different because it is not procedurally generated. The only similarities are returning to the same locations over and over again with its time looping mechanic, but that's about it. Usually, roguelike games are quite punishing and don't allow players to carry over much of the equipment or gear to future playthroughs, but Deathloop gives you ample time and resources to carry over nearly everything that you would ever want carried over. It is quite a unique experience, one that will stay in your head long after you put down the controller, tempting you to come back and uncover more of Black Reef's numerous secrets or scheming other ways to take down the game's visionaries. Colt Vaughn and his goal to upend the loop on Black Reef is one of this year's greatest surprises, and I wholly recommend checking this game out this holiday season.
I know where they spend time, but I'm guessing it won't be as easy as hunting them down. Good thing I'm one stubborn motherfucker.